What's going on, everyone? This is the first video in a Let's Talk series where I play unpopular builds and share things with you like the amount of investment required, leveling experience, how they play, and how they feel. For this video, we will be talking about a lightning trap Saboteur. More specifically, a low-life lightning trap Saboteur. Before we jump in, I want to make it clear to everyone that I wasn't following a particular guide. I was referencing some of the top lightning trap builds on PoE Ninja and was adopting different ideas and setups based on what these players were using. So with that in mind, let's get started with the leveling experience. This character was not my league starter, so I had access to leveling uniques such as a Tabula, Life Sprigs, Gold Rim, etc. I was also very lazy and decided to avoid most life nodes and just stick with my in-game tree setup, and as you might expect, this was a terrible idea. I ended up dying a lot. If I were to do it all over again, I would level with more life nodes and would try leveling with a different skill other than Lightning Trap. Maybe something like Stormblast Mine would have been more suitable, and it might have been worth grabbing a 5-link Tinker skin instead of using the Tabula. A very important aspect of this build is transitioning to low life, which allows you to pick up Pain Attunement for a significant damage boost. You want to make sure you have enough ES before making this transition, but more importantly, you need to have a Chavaron's Wrappings. Which brings us to our next section, Build Investment. As with many low-life builds, you cannot transition without Chavaron's Wrappings, so this becomes one of the many investments required to make this build feel good, and early on in the league, getting a 6-link Chavs can be quite the pain in the arse. Another item that would be a pretty big investment early on in the league is the presence of Cheula. 3 weeks into Ultimatum, and this item is still sitting at around 50 Chaos. But if you're having trouble getting this item, there's always the Brine King Pantheon that can help you avoid stuns until you are able to afford one. Next up on the grocery list, we have a Shaper Shield. This build utilizes Glancing Blows, which many of you may know feels terrible without the mods that a Shaper Shield offers you, which in this case is recover % of energy shield when you block. This mod requires a shield to be a high level in order to obtain it, which also increases the price. I purchased a Titanium Spirit Shield with Shaper influence early on in the league to get the exact same mod for another build I was playing, and just for the base it was about 1.5 exalts. I then obviously had to craft via Harvest to get the mod I was looking for, which ended up taking quite a while. If you want to buy one of these shields with the mod on it early in the league, expect to pay a pretty penny for it. We'll touch on this item again later in the video. As for the wand, I'm currently using a very cheap wand, and I believe this is one of the items you can get away with not spending too much on, especially if you already have the trigger craft and are able to put that on a decent wand yourself. Another very important piece of the puzzle is the Lightning Trap Helm enchant that allows the trap to pierce 3 additional targets. Without this enchant, you will have to use a pierce support in your gem setup, which lowers your overall damage. I was able to pick this enchant up on a Crown of the Inward Eye for very cheap, but I believe that's because the person selling it had no idea what they had. I bought the helm for around 5 Chaos, and currently these helms with the Lightning Trap enchant on them are going for around 90 Chaos. Even getting this enchant on a good ES base like a Hubris Circlet will cost you a decent amount, if not more than a Crown of the Inward Eye. For the other slots like your belt, rings, boots, and gloves, I purchased decently rolled items, prioritizing energy shield and resistances. You want to get as much energy shield as you can from these items, which can result in spending a lot of currency if you do not want to craft these yourself. And let's face it, with Harvest gone, you don't. On top of this, the build uses a Wise Oak, which will require you to play around with your resistances so that you can get lightning penetration from the flask. I also had quite a bit of trouble with mana cost and mana regen, even with clarity and reduced cost on rings. I fixed this problem by using a Divergent Inspiration support, which reduces the mana cost of the skill it's linked to. This gem is currently sitting at around 65 Chaos, but will cost you more early on in the league. You're also going to need an Enlighten support that's at least level 3 to make your aura setup work. And lastly, let's briefly talk about jewels and a Watcher's Eye. The current setup I'm using only uses a medium cluster jewel and a small cluster jewel. If you are able to get reduced mana reservation on your shield alongside the recover ES on block mod, then you can opt out of some nodes on the tree and grab a large cluster jewel or more damage elsewhere if you can find it. For me, this build feels very min-maxy, and by that I mean the damage felt very lackluster, but with every little upgrade here and there, including character levels, I could feel my damage picking up quite a bit. So, a Watcher's Eye with increased lightning damage while affected by Wrath almost felt necessary. Also, utilizing a Thread of Hope allowed me to pick up more damage that also felt like it was needed to make the build feel good. These 2 items will set you back a bit financially, not to mention jewels that you will want to pick up eventually. In my opinion, the investment required was pretty significant. All in all, early on in the league, you're looking at spending around 12 exalts. This would most likely go down over the course of the league. And it could be cheaper if you get lucky linking your Chavs, but if you're like me and Jesus hates you, then it could end up costing you around 5x to link, which at that point you'd be better off just buying it 6-linked anyway. You could obviously spend way more than this buying good, rare items and jewels, but this is the bare minimum of investment that I felt like was required to get the build up and running. Obviously, if you're okay hanging out in lower tier maps for a while, you could get away with using less than this, but most of these items felt necessary for me to comfortably complete red tier maps. Now onto what I'm sure most of you are interested in, how the build feels. In my opinion, this build was pretty slow going in terms of damage, even though I was lucky enough to have currency to almost immediately jump into the in-game setup. And even with the low life setup on a 6-link Shavs, I was struggling to kill tier 11 map bosses. Over time, with more levels and investment, this did start to feel a bit better. At level 92, I can comfortably clear tier 16 maps, but bosses still feel like somewhat of a slog. A lot of the people playing Lightning Trap utilize Sigil of Power, which I thought would increase my damage quite a bit, but it doesn't really help all that much. And on top of that, Sigil of Power requires you to stay within the circle to gain its benefits, which is pretty much the last thing you want to do when you're playing Path of Exile, especially in Ultimatums. That being said, I do feel like there is plenty of room left on my character for improvements, like getting a pair of boots with the enchant that gives you more lightning damage if you haven't killed recently, getting a better wand, more jewels, and getting more ES on my gear, which could free up more skill points on the tree to invest in more damage. Now let's talk a little bit about the defense. As I said earlier, this build uses glancing blows, which requires a shaper shield. Before getting to that point, my character felt pretty squishy, but I did take the lazy route while leveling, and this problem could have been avoided by maybe investing into more life, but overall, even with the shield and switching to low life, my build can feel a little squishy at times. I'm currently hovering around 6.8k ES, which I know isn't that much, and I'd imagine with some more gear investment and higher ES levels, the character would feel much better. This build also uses Vaal Discipline, which actually makes a massive difference in terms of survivability. The only issue here is you can't have 100% uptime on this skill, so the times when your Vaal Discipline is down, you are definitely more vulnerable. Okay, so now that you've had the rundown on what the build is all about, how does it play? As far as actually playing the game with Lightning Trap, I love it. I've always been a fan of this skill for some reason. The sound it makes and the explosion of blue hairballs all over the screen, I just find it very satisfying. The playstyle of running and throwing traps can feel a little off at times, and I can see why some people just outright hate it though. You kind of have this playstyle of stepping and throwing and stepping and throwing, but when you mix in Vaal Discipline, Sigil of Power, and Bear Trap for single target, it becomes quite involved, which makes the experience more enjoyable in my opinion. Will you be one-shotting conquerors with this build? Probably not. But I do think its min-maxy nature can be really fun for some players and creates this ever-reaching ceiling of performance that is seemingly only held back by currency. So if you're looking for something a little different and love taking a build to its maximum potential, then the low-life Lightning Trap Saboteur might be for you. If you guys have any obscure builds or underutilized skills that you would like me to do a Let's Play video on, then share them with me in the comments. If you like this video, let me know by giving it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe for more gaming-related content.